Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we have reached the portion of the program where we put the whipped cream on top, or maybe even the cherry. It's called Talkin Liberty. It's at the heart of Liberty Nation Radio. And so we welcome back our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, or the man who we prefer to call our guardian of individual liberty, Scott David Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim. Hard to feel bad after that great introduction. Thank you so much
for
it.
We try to get you into fighting shape here. So let's talk about fighting shape. Breonna Taylor and the grand jury and some of the extraordinary things that have happened surrounding this case in Louisville, Kentucky.
There is so much to kind of unpack here, Tim. So I think when we last checked in, it was before the grand jury. The grand jury no-billed for the killing of Breonna Taylor, that her death was not a crime that can be attributable to one of the police officers, and that one of the police officers was charged with a crime for recklessly firing shots into other people's apartments, not Breonna Taylor's. What we've now had is that the judge wishes to release a transcript of the tapes of the grand jury proceedings, and that's going to happen. The attorney general was granted a delay so that they could be redacted for telephone and personal information, telephone numbers and social security information and the like. But Tim, the other crazy thing that's happened that has never before that anybody kind of has heard of is one of the grand jurors has basically sued. They've filed a motion in court to try to get their vow of secrecy lifted. Right now, if they were to speak, they could be liable for criminal contempt and serve time in jail or prison, and almost certainly they would. One of the very sacrosanct measures of our system is that grand jurors not talk about the evidence that was presented in the grand jury. And with a mind, by the way, towards roasting the prosecution and making a kind of a point that there was racial bias without evidence. That's sort of my analysis of the reasoning behind the move. I think it's very important, and what we're going to see in the future here is that the public is going to be outraged by what they perceive as bias in the grand jury presentment. But that's because they have no experience with grand jury presentments. If they were to listen, the grand jury presentments where white persons were the people who were dead or the accused, they would see that it's essentially the same thing.
Now, in your article on this issue in LibertyNation.com, you use it as a springboard to discuss the grand jury process and where it stands today. It's something that's specifically outlined in the Constitution. But there have been so many problems with it, not the least of which is the one-sided presentation. And now the full privacy granted a grand jury inquiry is now in doubt as well.
The problem is prosecutions go light on police the police when they're investigating in the grand jury. That's the kind of rub that has the people who are skeptical of police power on edge. And that runs from Black Lives Matter to straight up libertarianish Republicans. Okay. There are many counties in the United States, big counties in the United States, that have had plenty of police shootings, and never a single one has ever been passed through the grand jury to indictment, to a point where it becomes almost clownish, where it's like really not a single one has ever been. And so, but the problem is those police officers are also U.S. citizens entitled to every protection and right under the Constitution. California, Tim, tried to basically dissolve a number of the rights that police officers have in the grand jury process, and that attempt was overturned. So the elegance with which we have to craft a solution to this matter is high, and I think it's beyond certainly the broadswords that we've seen in the fight so far. You know, it has to be a scalpel, and we have to get in there and figure out a way that police officers can have their rights protected, and yet also the grand jury process isn't a sham. It wasn't put in place to be a buoy or check on the life of Breonna Taylor, but a check on charges against people who may have killed her, whether those people are black or white. And by the way, grand jury presentments that don't involve police charges, the idea that they somehow benefit whites over blacks, we have no evidence presented that shows that.
All right, from Louisville, Kentucky, we move to Annapolis, Maryland, where a student has sued the Naval Academy over his expulsion for social media posts, raising the whole question of to what degree the military service can control the private utterings of their students.
I think it's a fascinating issue and story, Tim. I think we mentioned briefly some weeks ago, there's a case out of Philadelphia where some police officers were fired for Facebook posts attributed to them. And I just think that this is another case. This is not a case where people have uttered racial slurs, for instance, which have been ruled that governments can dismiss people from service for. This is just an opinion about whether or not what somebody said was racist. And this has to do, Tim, with this broader notion. I think when 10 years ago, we could all agree something that was racist involved a statement that indicated a preference for one race over another. And this has nothing to do with that. This is the sort of broader where if you say something I don't like, I get to sort of say that you're racist.
And the beat goes on with COVID. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has banned localities from collecting fines for people either not wearing masks or perhaps wearing them improperly. But local officials say they'll keep issuing fines anyway. Something's got to give. What's it going to be, Scott?
Well, I hope it's the local officials, because what we've seen and the investigations have seen, I think the Miami Herald has done these investigations. They're using it like a speed trap, Tim. It's so maddening that they're basically laying in wait for where they suspect people who will be in no danger to anyone or themselves will be out of doors without a mask. We're not talking about some businesses operating a speakeasy where people are crammed together spreading the COVID. We're talking about people who are outside in Florida walking around being ticketed with a $100 fine for the crime of not having a mask, in violation, by the way, of the state directive. So let's hope that DeSantis and the state authorities can crack down on the craven. And I do think it's craven. I think it's about the money, Tim. $100 a piece. You can imagine they don't have all the parking fines and the other things that they're used to fill their coffers on the backs of the citizens.
Have we not reached the point where state law is supreme over local law, the same way federal law is supreme over state law?
I think that for the officials in question, the supremacy question is secondary to them being able to retire at 57 and a half with a 95% pension for the next 25 years on the backs of the taxpayers. But I could be wrong.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.